Welcome to the Rolling Forward podcast,
a platform where we talk about all things logistics.
Leading this discussion, you've got Brett and Nathan.
And together, we share a passion for the logistics industry.
Okay, welcome back.
Good afternoon.
We're here.
Beautiful.
So for context, Brett doesn't know the title of this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
We gave you a heads up 5 minutes ago as to what we're going to talk about.
Yep.
But the title for this one is Highways, Heartbeats and Open Heart Surgery.
Right.
We're going on a bit of a different twist here.
Yep.
And we're going to start by talking about your actual experience of major open heart surgery.
Yes.
Link it to logistics.
Yes.
On what it means inside our business and our industry and whatnot. Talk about some of the things that we're going to be doing to support our employees going forward, having learnt some lessons.
Yep.
And also talk about some of the unfortunate sides where, we've got people around us that have lost their lives from major health events.
Issues. Yeah.
Yep. So let's just dive straight in. I want you to, before I ask the first proper question, I want you to explain what surgery did you actually have last year?
Yeah. Thanks, Nathan. I had open heart surgery to replace my aortic valve, which was, I suspect, part of the problem. It wasn't, I was born genetically with only 2 flaps. It's supposed to have 3. And then that seemed to cause, at the base of the aorta, what they call the aortic root, an expansion of the aorta, which is then at risk of, like an old hydraulic hose, blowing up, in which case you're about a minute from death at that point.
And I remember in one of the sessions we had with our joint coach, unfortunately her husband passed away from them.
Exactly the same thing. That's right.
She was in the house and unfortunately he had a burst.
It's something that is, it's a random event, but it's not random. There are signs before that. So if you can get yourself looked at and understand if there is a risk or an issue, then you can solve it. And while it is a major and invasive operation, it fixes the problem. So that risk goes away. So with a lot of things in life, it's about risk reduction. Identify the risk. Do something to reduce the risk.
But something as major as that is like, how do you actually uncover that you need to go down the pathway of actually pursuing, this unknown thing that's going on? So I want you to think back to, what was the moment that made you realize that, hey, I need to get something checked out here? Or
I was having dizzy spells. Unexplained dizzy spells. So I went to a ear, nose and throat specialist who said it's 3 things, I think it's head, heart and kidneys, I think, or some damn things. We're going to test 3 of them.
Yep.
So I went off and had, scans on my brain, a bunch of heart tests with a cardiologist, and then some other scans on my kidneys.
And just back to when you're saying you're dizzy before as well, I actually remember times where you'd spend time out in the yard, you'd come back and you'd literally go grey. And I've never seen that actually occur, but you'd have moments where you're literally grey and you're sort of leaning over your desk and
wasn't
the officer running water to you and so forth.
That's right. Yeah.
These were the early signs of like what is actually happening here.
I think I was dehydrated. I think that's probably the most common, explanation of what was really going on, because everything turned up really nothing in terms of anything that would cause those dizzy spells by and of himself. But what it did do is, and I think it's great advice from probably about the age of 45 or 50, you really need to have a cardiologist.
Yep.
So your heart's checked over, which then can blow out to 5 or 7 year reviews if your heart's clean and good. Same with your head. You need to have a scan on yourself to work out what's wrong, and that's one thing that my ENT suggested is, when you get to that age, stuff starts to go wrong, and the only way you're going to know if it is going wrong is to get checked.
Yep.
And it's great advice. At the end of the day, you can have all the money you like, but if you've got a major health flaw that's going to kill you,
that pulls you up pretty fast.
You're dead.
And I think the other thing I want you to highlight is, I remember in one of your appointments with the cardiologist, at the very end of the appointment, the cardiologist was talking about certain measurements. And, over this time span, this has gone to this and it's gone to that, and when it gets to this, we might need to operate. And you were like, what? And this is sort of as you're walking out, as you're telling me. So
I
explain that a bit.
So I'd had the that test, which is they used basically a ultrasound device and do a bunch of measurements. And the aortic root's one of the things they measure. It's a common problem. My because of my genetic defect, my root had started to expand, and I had, these were just numbers to me on a page. No, it didn't mean anything to me. 40, I think it was started in the mid 40s, low 40s, and then it got to about 47. They like to operate between 50 and 55 millimeter dilation.
Yep.
And my cardiologist was a little bit flippant about it, and so I had these measurements for 3 years, unbeknownst to me.
Yep.
It was just as we were walking out on the 3 years in, and as I'm shaking his hand, he said, "Oh, we might have to have a look at your aortic root. It's getting out. It's increasing in size."
Yep.
I said, "Okay, thank you. I'll thank you. I'll see you next time." So I've gone home and straight on the Dr. Google and
Freaked yourself out?
and said, "This is not a very good concept."
Yeah.
So I'm not waiting for 50 mil on this damn thing because this thing can blow. So I said, I got to get this thing fixed.
Yep.
So I went back. I said, I sent him an email. So I could come back and see you and discuss this aortic root issue.
Yep.
So I went back and got a bit more information from him. Then went and saw a surgeon and said, well, it's not must do urgent. I basically backed off exercise at that point and took all the stress away from the heart.
Yep.
And said, I need to get this done. So I booked it in and had it done, I think, 8 months later. And you know, it's major surgery, but it had to be done. Otherwise, you're just walking around with a hand grenade in your hand.
Well, let's talk about that, because that was a bit of a controversial timing of when you went for it, because I think it was about August that sort of things really intensified.
Yes.
And I remember there was a conversation that your wife Annette had with me. It was along the lines of, you know, like I think September she booked you in.
That's right.
and she timed it in such a way, like with
I had to get off that operation table and fixed in 8 weeks.
And that was in line with the holidays you'd pre-booked for November, December.
That's right.
She'd already organised, you know, she had a vision in mind of you'd be in the wheelchair, you know.
That's right.
Relaxing, this and that, all taken care of. And you obviously had different ideas.
Yeah.
And, you know, many conversations. And you know, on my side of things, this is my first sort of introduction to this side of stuff from a health perspective. So I was freaking out with the concept of you pushing it back, you know, and you obviously got advice from
the cardiologist was probably more relaxed than the surgeon. The surgeon made the point that, okay, we operate in the 50s, so the only people who had this problem and die are the people in the 40s.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Taking that view, he was a little bit less relaxed compared to the cardiologist. But I didn't, you know, I'd not had any sort of issues. But again, with this particular problem, it just blows and that's it.
Yep.
So it was a risk I took, but I thought based on the fact that it was stable, Nathan hadn't moved for 3 years.
Yep.
Was pretty fair bet. So
Yeah.
proved to be so.
And that was ultimately, you know, what the crux was, which is this was very much a early preventative measure in taking the
initially
on.
That's right.
Seeking the advice from the professionals around.
Yep.
And then essentially you as a team came together and went, well, hey, Brawl, we're going to book this in.
It's happening. That's right. Yeah.
And so I want to shift then into gear of going, well, what did the process of preparing for surgery actually look like? Not just physically, but also emotionally, and also getting the business ready.
Yeah, well, it was working with you and the team to get a structure to work while I was away. And so, you know, you had I wasn't probably going to make a lot of sense for the first 2 or 3 weeks.
No, and you didn't.
I was heavily drugged up. I remember at first night in intensive care, man, I was drugged up.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that's the whole point of what we're doing going forward, isn't it? Is to develop a team so that if I run or get hit by a bus, we keep going.
Or more so, jump on the boat and sail away for.
Yeah, I can do some of that. That's well,
Yep.
but the point being, we're not just 1 or 2 people. You know, we're a team of people, and we work for a common goal.
Yep. But remember, you know, what we were really focusing on is yes, getting our managers in position, armoured up,
Yep.
and so forth.
Yes.
Behind the scenes, we also had discussions separate to you
Yes.
where it was the case of all the eyes were on Brett in the yard to go, don't let him jump in a truck, don't let him do this, don't let him do that, the preparation. And I remember the morning of your operation, I was saying to you how grateful I was that you're there, and it was almost like a relaxant to me to go, he's there, he's made it, and if something happens right now, he's already on the bed.
That's right.
You know, the doctor's
on the table.
there.
That's right. That's as good a shot as I've got.
And, you know, on my side, like I was holding so much in for such a long time. I remember I ended that phone call to you, and then I just burst into tears and had a big session with Grace as a download.
Yeah.
For, you know, it'd been a long time coming, have that operation.
Yeah. Yeah, it was. And it was risky, and, you know, but I was confident they were going to do a good job.
Yep.
But yeah, I know it was probably more stressful for others than perhaps for me.
Yeah.
But in terms of prep for it, I mean, was the business obviously setting up some structures if I didn't make it out the backside of the operation?
Yep.
But otherwise, mentally, you know, it wasn't something I was looking forward to.
Yep.
So I knew it was going to hurt a bunch, and it did.
Yep.
And I was going to be incapacitated for a while, for 8 weeks, basically. So.
Yep.
Well, I think I was away for 6 weeks. But I came back after about 6 and had a bit of a squiz and went home.
You came back straight on the day you're allowed to drive.
That's right, 6 weeks.
But, you know, you weren't overdoing yourself.
No.
You were just living life.
No, I was, to be honest, Nath, I was in pretty poor shape.
Yep.
Yep. Relatively
But,
speaking.
you know, you were conscious to that.
Yeah. That's right. I mean, I remember one time there was a new table we'd bought at the back that needed varnishing, which normally I'd do stand on my ear, but I just stood there, I couldn't do it. So I asked my mate Greg to come over and do it because it was just beyond me. I could not get up and wax some lacquer on a table.
Yep.
So no, it was quite debilitating, the results of it. But you know, you get stronger and stronger and stronger, and now I'm back to normal. So
yep. Yeah, most certainly back to exercise and all sorts of things.
That's right. But the whole idea of you've got to get the health team to look and to be checking to make sure these things. And, you know, we had that unfortunate incident, one of our drivers who had a heart attack, and it's preventable. Most of these things are preventable. They don't happen out of the blue. There are signs. So we've got to take those appropriate steps to try and flush these things out so we can deal with them. Because they are often can deal with them.
Well, I see it as three scenarios. You've got, you know, your scenario where there were distant warning signs, you know, other things, you know, for example, like the going grey, dehydration type thing, that was a reason to go get some checks. It wasn't the reason, but there are other things that brought this to light.
That's right.
Then you got another scenario where, you know, we got a customer, for example, where he had some health symptoms going on.
Yes.
That brought him to hospital on a Tuesday.
Yeah.
They did some checks and said, hey, by the way, you're coming back on Friday, and we're doing open heart surgery.
That's right.
And, you know, like we just spoke about the length of time you had to actually plan personal and professional aspects of your life.
Yes.
Versus someone that's got 3 or 4 days to sign wills and adjust this and adjust that, which is just, you know, emotionally really tough too.
Well, one of my accountants had just had a heart attack, and literally he didn't have 3 days. It was like, boom.
There's the event.
There's the event. They got to save him. So that's, A, it's scary, and B, it's probably something people need to be across, you know, to avoid these things. They're not unforeseen events.
No. And then we've got, you know, the really unfortunate scenario where, you know, we speak of Ricky at the start of the year where he was going through reviews and treatment.
That's right.
To try and understand X, Y, Z, blah, blah, blah. And ultimately, during the process of that, you know, whilst on shift, he actually had a heart attack and passed away.
Yeah, I know.
Which is the most extreme.
Yeah, that's the bad outcome. That's the outcome you want to avoid. So.
Yep. So I really answered the next question, which is many people skip checkups.
Yeah.
You know, what do you think would have happened if you hadn't gone in when you did? You know,
who knows, Nate? I could have been a statistic.
Yep. Quite possible.
Another one of these people who died from a aortic blowout.
Yep.
So he just, as I tell anyone who'll listen, that you know, if you can spend money on things, but the first dollar you should spend is on your health.
Yep.
The first dollar you should spend, you know, and I get frustrated when the government goes down this path of making Medicare free and stuff. I'm not sure it should be free. There should be a charge every time you go to the doctor, but the point being that people should be conditioned to spend money on their health, whereas we're trying to condition them that it should be free. And unfortunately, the system will pick you up, chew you up, and spit you out. You got to manage your own health.
Yep.
If you don't manage your own health, in my view, you're crazy. Yep. Manage your own health.
Yeah. Well, who else is going to care more about you than yourself?
Nobody. And that's why the system will spit you out. So pay attention, go to the appointments, and spend money on your health.
Yep. Talking about recovery, you said it took about 2 months.
Yep.
What surprised you most about recovery? Like you can read about it, you can hear about it from the team you had around you that were guiding you.
Yep.
But what was the thing that surprised you most about recovery and then coming back into work?
Yeah, a couple of things. One was the fibrillations that I was having, the heart flutters, which could extend on for
12 hours and
a week. It could be 3 hours. It was very random when it came.
Yeah,
it was very random when it left. So that was, I knew it was a possible complication, but I got a bunch of those, which are pretty frustrating for the first 3 weeks. But they said 3 or 4 weeks. They said after about 4 weeks, they usually disappear, and that's what happened. They just stopped.
Yep.
The other thing was the amount of pain, in the sternum brake.
Yep.
And the inability to move. And then it was just the lack of energy, Nate. It was like they sucked energy out of you in the operation because just had no get up and go. Yeah, none. So I couldn't move. So, but it did take a long time to get better. And that's, when you think about it, it was, a 5-hour op or whatever it was.
Yes.
But the footprint of that is, stretched like 8 weeks.
Yeah. It was almost like a really intense first week.
Yeah.
A really tough 4 weeks.
And it just took a bit better and a bit better. Every day was a bit better after the other, but it was really slow.
Yep.
Really slow recovery. So,
and it might be an obvious question, but what's your comfort levels right now mentally compared to the likes of, 12 months ago, 12 months plus?
Like prior to the operation?
Correct.
Yeah. I in my mind had really discounted it as being a big risk.
Yep.
Like in that short term prior to operation. And I, obviously I didn't exercise too much in that time. I took it really easy. So I didn't perceive that as a big risk. In my mind, that was the rational man said that's a 1 in a, a 10,000 chance. So
totally preventative.
Yeah. The rational man said, I've got that fixed. It'll happen in April.
Yep.
So it wasn't an irrational response to that.
Yep.
And now I still have the same views about. This could go pear shaped, but it's relatively low. Again, very low risk. So I don't give it more heed than it's worth.
Yep.
Which is very, very, very low risk. So
yep.
I still give it a bash every now and again, Nathan, on the bike or go for a run or whatever. So
yep.
It seems to go okay.
Good. And for logistics professionals listening right now, because it's obviously our target audience listening.
Yes.
So for those logistics professionals listening right now that feel fine, what's your advice and what would you say to them about getting checked and staying ahead of heart health? Yeah,
well, that's get a cardiologist. You've got to go and see a cardiologist and have those various tests that they do on terms of pressure, size, and flow rates through valves. Because valves can deteriorate as they do as you get older. And in my case, I had a defective valve, 2 flaps rather than 3. So I always had this bleeding through the pressure release process going on. So, but that was something that needed to get replaced. I had no symptoms in terms of reduced performance or anything like that. It was the same as I was when I was like 40. So
yep.
But get the cardiologist for your heart, someone to look at your head, and someone look at your other systems. There's no other way around it. You just got to go and do it. If you don't go and do it, then you're just taking the risk.
Yep. Invest the time, invest the money.
And invest the time, invest the money. Like Rick was 59.
Yep.
It's frustrating that we lose people like that. It's very frustrating.
Yep. So let's shift gears and talk about one last thing before we close out.
Yep.
And I want to stay with the topic of major health.
Yes.
So we've been discussing this topic recently in our business about medicals.
We have.
Particularly towards our operators that are behind machinery and trucks.
Yes.
In how do we support them? And we've come down to 3 things in particular we want to focus on. Why don't you talk about those?
Yep.
And also the reasons why.
Yeah. Well, I think they're risks to operation. So what we don't want is our drivers to have an issue, a heart health, brain, or other sort of issue while they're behind the wheel.
Yep.
Because that puts at risk them. It also puts at risk other families on the road.
Yep.
And we don't want that. We want to try and reduce that. Now, unfortunately, we end up with in the industry, a lot of box ticking, which is about, generic health tests.
Yes, and it frustrates us immensely.
Yeah, it does. It's just, in our view, necessary, but doesn't really yield a lot of sensible outcomes.
And it's questionable whether it's really the duty of care of the actual patient.
It's ticking the box.
Yep.
The three things it seems to me, you might just jog my memory, make sure I get them correctly.
So we're looking at heart,
head,
we're looking at blood pressure,
and diabetes.
Diabetes.
Yeah. They're three things that, diabetes can cause blackouts and various other things that are a problem when you're operating.
And we've had that with drivers where they've had blurred vision and all sorts of
You bet. That's bad. Blood pressure is just a bad thing for you, for your body. And
we've had, a couple of employees that we can think of right now that have had strokes whilst they've been employed with us.
That's right. But also having problems with before the stroke, the pre-stroke bit, which is the high blood pressure causing, vision losses and various other things like that, and feeling really, really poorly. So, what do we trust we tick off? Diabetes,
blood pressure.
Yeah.
And
your heart health. Heart health, yeah. And there is absolutely no substitute for going to the cardiologist, because they will run a bunch of tests that typically won't get from a GP.
Yeah.
And they're like invasive things which will look very clearly at your heart and your heart health and highlight these risk factors, like closing of arteries and veins, like in my case, the aortic root blowout.
Yep.
They'll do all those sorts of tests and give you, and valves as well, valve health. So, I had a valve that I think if I live to 90 or 95, I'll probably need to get replaced. Yep. So it has a finite lifespan, or a limited lifespan. So, and that's not as big a operation as I had, but I'm fully prepared that at some point I may have to replace that valve.
Well, I heard recently that the absolute legend, Max Wrinkles, who's connected with Mac and Volvo, who, what's he, 99, 97?
Well of his 90s,
just, amazingly, in recent years, he had a heart operation too.
Did he? Okay.
Not to the extent of open heart surgery, but, the...
upper leg valve replacement.
Correct, yeah.
Yeah.
And he very much had the vision of, I'm still living.
That's right.
This is, again, this is prevention.
He's going strong.
And anyway, just as a side note, like if you research this guy, he is just incredible.
Yeah.
He just recently sold his business in Western Australia to Volvo at the age of, I think it's 97.
Yeah. Yeah, and he looks great, doesn't he? He's really going strong.
His commentary is, I'm ready to retire. So hence he sold his business to Volvo. And a couple of years ago had this operation, is what the guys are telling us over the weekend.
Yeah, no, good on him.
Just incredible. So it goes to show, like, age is somewhat,
It's just a number at the end of the day if you care for yourself. Yeah.
Correct. Yep. Perfect. All right. Well, thank you for sharing your story and talking about this. And really, the message that I've taken from this is that the importance of, irrespective of how you're feeling, making sure you've got a team around you of health professionals to regularly monitor yourself, and they might prescribe you on an annual, 3-year, 5-year, or in some cases a 10-year.
Depends on the risk. Yeah.
But at least then you've got that focus on yourself.
Yeah.
There's elements where the government are supporting, but ultimately taking it in your hands.
It's up to you. Yeah. Don't sit there on waiting lists waiting for specialists.
Yep.
Get to the front of the queue. Go private. Yeah.
Yep. Boom, boom. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Nathan.
Cool.
Thanks for listening to our podcast, Rolling Forward.
We love sharing content for the logistics industry, so please also connect with us on YouTube, LinkedIn, and Instagram.